Ladies and gentlemen, there are moments in life when everything seems out of control. The weight of uncertainty, the pressure of unmet expectations, the overwhelming nature of our struggles, all of it can bring us to a place of deep frustration. We try everything we can to fix our situations, to fight our battles, to solve our problems. But no matter how hard we work or how many different paths we take, the outcome often remains the same. We are stuck. And in those moments, we are faced with a choice. We can either continue striving in our own strength, trying to control every detail, or we can make the bold decision to let go and allow something greater to take over. When we allow ourselves to rest in the truth that we don't have to carry the weight of our challenges alone, everything changes. It's not a sign of weakness to admit that we cannot handle it all on our own. In fact, it's a sign of strength and wisdom. It is in that place of surrender that real transformation begins. The idea that we must be in control all the time is deeply ingrained in our culture. We are taught to be self-sufficient, to push through our problems, to never give up. But the truth is, there are times when we need to let go. We need to step back and allow God to work in ways we may not fully understand. Consider how a gardener tends to his plants. The gardener doesn't force the flowers to bloom, nor does he constantly hover over them, worrying about whether they will grow. He waters, nourishes, and cares for them. But then he steps back and trusts that in time the plants will flourish. Just like that gardener, we must trust that God has the power to work in ways that are beyond our ability to see. The issue is not whether God is able to take over our situation. The issue is whether we are willing to let Him. In the Bible, we are reminded over and over again that God is bigger than our problems, greater than our fears, and able to do more than we could ever ask or imagine. There is nothing in your life that is too big or too complicated for Him. When you face a mountain that seems insurmountable, remember that God has moved mountains before, and He is more than capable of moving yours too. Now, this doesn't mean that you sit back and do nothing. It doesn't mean that you don't act or make decisions. What it means is that you stop trying to manipulate every circumstance or control every outcome. Instead, you take action, but with a spirit of surrender, trusting that God is guiding your steps. There's a peace that comes when you understand that God is ultimately in control, and you don't have to carry the burden of figuring it all out. Letting God take over doesn't always happen in an instant. Sometimes it takes time for us to release our grip on the situation and trust that He will do what is best for us. It requires patience. It requires faith, and it requires a willingness to let go of our own plans and ideas. But the moment you step into that place of surrender, you will begin to experience a peace that surpasses understanding. It's a peace that comes from knowing that you are not alone, that there is a higher power at work on your behalf, and that everything is happening for your good, even when you can't see it in the moment. You may feel like the storm around you is relentless. You may feel like the waves are crashing over you, threatening to drown you in your despair. But remember, the same God who calms the storm is with you in the storm. And when you let Him take over your situation, He will either calm the storm or He will give you the strength to walk through it. Either way, you will not be left to face it alone. Sometimes we think we are more capable of handling our lives on our own. We rely on our own wisdom, our own strength, and our own understanding. But that's not the path to true freedom. The path to peace, joy, and victory lies in trusting that God's ways are higher than our ways, that His understanding is greater than ours, and that He has a plan for us that far exceeds anything we could ever imagine. So today, make the decision to let go. Let go of the need to control. Let go of the fear that keeps you bound. Let go of the doubt that clouds your vision and trust that in His perfect timing, God will take over your situation and guide you to a place of victory. In our fast-paced, goal-oriented world, we are constantly told that success comes from hard work, planning, and control. We are conditioned to believe that in order to achieve anything, we must exert complete control over every detail, every decision, every outcome. We push ourselves to meet deadlines, solve problems, and navigate challenges, often with little room for rest or surrender. But the reality is, there are moments in life when we reach a point where no amount of effort or control can change our circumstances. These moments are hard to face because they challenge our deep-rooted belief that we should be able to manage everything on our own. However, it is in these very moments that the most transformative decision we can make is to let go and allow God to take over. Letting go is not a passive act. It is not about resigning to fate or abandoning our responsibilities. Rather, it is an active choice to acknowledge that while we have the ability to make decisions and take action, there are forces greater than ourselves at work. It is an acknowledgement that we are not the ultimate solution to our problems. We were not created to carry the weight of the world on our shoulders alone. In fact, trying to control everything is a burden that can drain us emotionally, spiritually, and physically. We often become overwhelmed by the constant pressure to keep everything together, and when things don't go as planned, we find ourselves frustrated, anxious, and defeated. When we make the conscious decision to surrender control, we release the pressure to have all the answers and let go of the unrealistic expectation that we must fix everything ourselves. We free ourselves from the constant worry that we are somehow failing if we don't have a solution to every problem. This act of surrender is a powerful reminder that we don't have to do it all. It doesn't mean we stop making decisions or taking action, but it does mean we trust that there is a higher purpose at work beyond what we can see in the moment. When we let go, we are acknowledging that we are not in control of the outcome, but we trust that God is. This act of trust shifts our perspective. Instead of seeing life as a series of obstacles we must navigate through sheer willpower, we begin to see it as a journey where we are guided and supported by a higher power. In this space, we no longer need to have all the answers. The pressure to perform or succeed on our own diminishes, and we start to find peace in the unknown, knowing that we don't have to figure it all out by ourselves. Letting go also requires a shift in our mindset about success and failure. For many of us, success is tied to control. If we can control the circumstances, we believe we can guarantee the outcome. But this is not always the case. Life is unpredictable, and no matter how hard we work or how much effort we put in, there are always factors beyond our control. When we surrender, we are acknowledging that we don't have to control everything to be successful. Success, in this sense, is not defined by the outcome alone, but by our willingness to trust and obey, even in the face of uncertainty. It's about trusting that God knows what's best for us, even when we can't see how everything will unfold. Letting go of control is also an invitation for us to embrace the peace that comes from knowing we are not alone. The burden of carrying everything ourselves can lead to burnout, anxiety, and exhaustion. But when we surrender, we release that weight and allow ourselves to rest in the assurance that God is working on our behalf. This rest is not passive. It is an active trust that God is orchestrating our lives in ways we cannot comprehend. We may not always understand why things happen the way they do, but we can trust that He is in control and that He is working everything together for our good. At the heart of letting go of control is the understanding that we are not meant to carry every burden ourselves. We were created for partnership with God and with others. We are not meant to navigate life's challenges in isolation. When we allow God to take over, we invite Him into the process, acknowledging that His strength, wisdom, and love are far greater than our own. This does not mean that our role is irrelevant or our decisions, actions, and efforts still matter. But when we relinquish control, we open ourselves up to a deeper level of peace, trust, and divine guidance. There are moments in life when we face challenges that seem insurmountable, obstacles that appear too large to overcome. In those moments, it's easy to feel overwhelmed, questioning whether we have the strength or ability to make it through. The weight of uncertainty and doubt can cloud our thinking, and the fear of failure can grip our hearts. But in the midst of these difficulties, it is essential to remember a fundamental truth. God is bigger than any problem we face. No matter how vast the challenge may seem, God is greater. This is a truth that should provide us with great comfort and confidence as we navigate the storms of life. When we encounter hardships, it is natural to feel small and powerless in comparison to the size of the challenges before us. Whether it's a personal struggle, a family issue, financial hardship, or a health crisis, the problems we face can make us feel like we're standing at the base of an enormous mountain, unsure how to even begin climbing. But we must remind ourselves that we are not facing these battles alone. The same God who created the universe, who parted the Red Sea, and who calmed the storm with a single word, is the same God who is with us in our struggles today. His power is limitless, and His ability to work in our lives exceeds anything we can imagine. God's greatness isn't just about His ability to conquer the challenges before us. It's also about His presence in the midst of our struggles. When we allow ourselves to trust in His power, we are not only acknowledging His capacity to solve our problems, but we are also recognizing that He is with us every step of the way. The Apostle Paul reminds us that God is our refuge and strength and ever-present help in trouble. This means that no matter how intense our problems may seem, God is right there with us, providing the strength, wisdom, and guidance we need. We are never alone in our struggles, even when we feel isolated or overwhelmed. There is a profound sense of peace that comes from knowing that God is greater than anything we face. When we truly embrace the understanding that God is bigger than our problems, it shifts our perspective. The things that once seemed impossible begin to shrink in comparison to the magnitude of His power. Instead of focusing on the size of the mountain, we begin to focus on the size of our God. And when we shift our focus to God's greatness, we start to see the problems before us through a different lens. They no longer seem insurmountable. They become opportunities for God to show His glory and power. But this requires us to trust. Trusting in God's power means acknowledging that even though we may not understand how or when He will act, we believe that He will act in the way that is best for us. It means surrendering our own understanding of how things should unfold and accepting that God's timing and plan are always better than our own. Often we want immediate solutions to our problems, but God's perspective is far greater. He sees the full picture, while we see only a small piece. Trusting in His power means allowing ourselves to wait on His perfect timing, knowing that He is orchestrating every detail for our good. The Bible is filled with examples of God's power working in the lives of His people. From the miraculous parting of the Red Sea to the resurrection of Jesus Christ, we see time and time again that God has the power to overcome any obstacle. These stories are not just historical accounts. They are reminders that the same God who worked miracles in the past is still working today. His power has not diminished over time. And just as He worked in the lives of the faithful in the Bible, He is working in our lives today. When we trust that God is bigger than our problems, we open ourselves up to experiencing His power in new and transformative ways. We no longer rely on our own limited strength or wisdom, but we begin to lean on the infinite power of God. And in doing so, we become more attuned to His guidance, more aware of His presence, and more confident in His ability to bring about the best possible outcome for us. This trust in God's power allows us to face our challenges with a sense of peace and assurance, knowing that no matter how big the problem, God's power is always greater. The truth is, there is nothing in our lives that is too big or too complicated for God to handle. He is bigger than our doubts, stronger than our fears, and more capable than we could ever imagine. When we face challenges, we must remember that God's power is greater than any situation we encounter. He is with us, He is for us, and He is always working on our behalf. When we choose to trust God with our circumstances, we experience a peace that transcends understanding. Life can feel like a constant whirlwind, full of chaos, challenges, and uncertainty. In those moments, the temptation is strong to try and control everything, to fix the problems ourselves, to solve the mysteries, and to make everything right. We often feel like we need to do more, act faster, or be more in control in order to find peace. But in truth, the peace we desperately seek cannot be manufactured by our own efforts. It comes only from trusting that God is in control and that He will take care of us in the midst of our trials. There is a unique kind of peace that comes when we finally let go of the need to control our situations. It's the kind of peace that doesn't rely on the absence of problems or difficulties, but on the presence of God. This peace doesn't come from understanding everything or knowing exactly what will happen next. Rather, it comes from knowing that we are held by something far greater than ourselves. It is a peace that is not dependent on external circumstances, but is rooted in the trust we place in God's plan for our lives. For many of us, the struggle lies in our deep desire for control. We think that if we can manage every detail, we can ensure a favorable outcome. We set goals, make plans, and push ourselves to be in charge of everything. Yet the more we strive to control our lives, the more stressed and anxious we often become. It's a constant battle, trying to make things work according to our vision. But when we let go and release our grip on control, something profound happens. We begin to experience a peace that isn't based on our ability to control every detail, but on our trust that God is sovereign and good. This peace doesn't come easily, especially when we face surrender or painful situations. It's a peace that requires surrender. Surrendering control means admitting that we can't fix everything on our own. It means acknowledging that we don't have all the answers, and that's okay. In that surrender, we allow God to step in and take over. It's a trust that He will not only be with us in the storm, but that He will carry us through it. And that trust brings peace. Peace that transcends understanding, because it doesn't depend on how things are going or whether everything is going according to plan. Instead, it depends on the certainty that God is with us, guiding us, and ultimately working things together for our good. The Apostle Paul speaks of this peace in Philippians 4:6-7 when he writes, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." Paul understood that when we let go of our anxiety and place our trust in God, a supernatural peace becomes available to us. It's a peace that guards our hearts from fear and worry, a peace that allows us to rest in the knowledge that God is in control and working on our behalf. In practical terms, this peace looks like letting go of the constant need to fix things. It looks like releasing the burden of carrying every worry and every concern. Instead of being paralyzed by fear or uncertainty, we learn to trust that God is already at work, even when we can't see the immediate results. It's a peace that comes when we stop trying to make everything perfect and accept that sometimes things will unfold in ways we don't understand. And in those moments, we can choose to trust that God knows what's best for us, even if it doesn't align with our own plans or expectations. This peace also gives us the strength to keep going, even when we don't have all the answers. When we trust God with the outcome, we can press forward with confidence, knowing that He will provide the wisdom, strength, and direction we need in every situation. This peace doesn't mean that everything will always go smoothly, but it means that we don't have to navigate life's challenges alone. The peace of God carries us through the difficult seasons, reassuring us that He is with us, that He is for us, and that He is working all things together for our good. The peace that comes from trusting God is also deeply transformative. It changes the way we view ourselves and the world around us. When we stop striving for control and instead rest in the peace of God, we experience a sense of freedom. We are freed from the burden of perfectionism, freed from the fear of failure, and freed from the pressure to have all the answers. We can approach each day with a sense of calm and confidence, knowing that no matter what happens, God's peace will sustain us. This peace doesn't come by accident. It comes through intentional trust and surrender. When we choose to release our fears, anxieties, and control into God's hands, He gives us a peace that nothing in this world can take away. It's a peace that transcends understanding because it is grounded in the unwavering truth that God is always with us, and He is more than capable of handling whatever comes our way. Letting go and trusting in God requires both patience and faith, two qualities that are often tested when we face challenges in life. It's easy to say that we trust God, but when we are in the middle of a difficult season, when the answers don't come as quickly as we would like, when things seem to be getting worse rather than better, that trust can be hard to maintain. Patience and faith are the anchors that keep us steady as we wait on God's perfect timing. When we let go of our need to control, we often find ourselves in a season of waiting, and it is in that waiting where our faith is stretched and refined. This season can feel uncomfortable, frustrating, and uncertain, but it is also a place where God does some of His most powerful work in us. Patience is not just about waiting for something to happen. It's about how we wait. It's about maintaining a spirit of calm and trust in the midst of uncertainty, knowing that God is working behind the scenes, even when we can't see it. Patience is an expression of trust. It says, I may not understand why things are happening this way, but I believe that God is good and that He has a plan. It's choosing to rest in the promise that God is faithful, even when the circumstances around us don't seem to reflect that truth. Faith, on the other hand, is the belief in God's ability and willingness to act on our behalf, even when the situation looks impossible. It's the assurance that, even though we don't have all the answers or all the details, God is still in control. Faith is not just a passive hope that things will work out. It is an active confidence that God will fulfill His promises. When we release control, we choose to have faith that God is at work, even in the areas where we feel powerless. This requires a willingness to trust in the unseen, to hold on to God's promises when everything around us is shaking. But patience and faith don't always come easily. There are times when we feel like we've been waiting forever for things to change, and the pressure to act or make something happen can become overwhelming. In those moments, we may question whether we should be doing more or whether God has forgotten about us. We may even wonder if our prayers are being heard or if we're doing something wrong. But it's important to remember that waiting on God is not a sign of inactivity. It's a sign of trust. When we choose to wait on God's timing, we are choosing to trust that He knows what is best for us and that His timing is perfect. During times of waiting, our faith is often tested. We may not see the immediate results we desire, and we may not understand why things are unfolding the way they are. But it's in those moments that God often does the most profound work in our hearts. He teaches us to rely on His strength, to trust in His wisdom, and to grow in the character traits that will sustain us through future challenges. Waiting is not just about holding out for a change in circumstances. It is about allowing God to shape and refine us in the process. This process of trusting and waiting often reveals areas of our lives that need to be surrendered. When things are uncertain, we may be tempted to take matters into our own hands, to force outcomes, or to make decisions based on fear or impatience. But it's in those moments that God calls us to release our grip and trust Him even more deeply. The more we surrender to God, the more our faith grows. The more we allow ourselves to wait on His timing, the more we begin to see His faithfulness in ways we may have missed when we were rushing through life. Patience and faith go hand in hand. The more patient we become, the stronger our faith grows. And the stronger our faith becomes, the more patient we can be. Patience doesn't mean passivity. It means actively trusting God while we wait. It means continuing to pray, continuing to move forward, and continuing to obey even when the path is unclear. It means holding on to hope when everything seems uncertain and waiting with an expectation that God will fulfill His promises in His perfect time. And faith doesn't mean pretending that everything is okay when it isn't. It means acknowledging our fears and doubts while choosing to trust in God's goodness, His timing, and His plan. When we choose to let go of our need to control, to trust in God's timing, and to remain patient through the process, we open ourselves up to experiences and lessons that will deepen our relationship with God and strengthen our character. Patience and faith are not just qualities that help us navigate our circumstances. They are tools that shape us into the people God has called us to be. Through patience, we learn to wait with hope. Through faith, we learn to trust even when we can't see the end of the journey. Both are essential for walking the path of surrender and trusting that God will guide us every step of the way. Trusting in God's plan for our lives is not always easy, but it is one of the most powerful ways to experience freedom, joy, and peace. So often we are taught to control, manage, and navigate every part of our journey, believing that we must have everything figured out to be successful. Our culture encourages self-reliance and the idea that we are the ultimate architects of our future. But the truth is, true freedom doesn't come from controlling every situation. It comes from trusting that God has a purpose for us that is far greater than anything we could plan on our own. When we trust in God's plan, we are acknowledging that He knows what is best for us, better than we could ever know. He has a unique, intricate plan for our lives that is designed with His love, wisdom, and understanding. This plan may not always look the way we expect it to. It may include detours, delays, or challenges that we didn't anticipate. But the beauty of trusting God's plan is that we release the need to control the outcome, knowing that He is working in ways we can't always see. His plan is perfect, and He will guide us to exactly where we need to be, even when the journey seems uncertain. One of the most freeing aspects of trusting in God's plan is letting go of the pressure to have everything figured out. Life is unpredictable, and no matter how hard we try to control every situation, there will always be moments where things don't go according to plan. When we trust in God's plan, we no longer have to be anxious about the future. We can let go of the fear that we are missing something or that we are on the wrong path. We can trust that even when things don't make sense, God is still at work, orchestrating our lives in ways that align with His ultimate purpose for us. Trusting in God's plan also allows us to step into a place of peace. When we cling to our own understanding, we often feel unsettled, constantly trying to predict the future and control every possible outcome. But when we surrender to God's plan, we let go of that burden. We stop trying to make everything fit into our narrow vision of what life should look like. Instead, we begin to see life from a broader perspective, one that is shaped by trust, faith, and the assurance that God is in control. This peace is not dependent on our circumstances, but on our confidence that God knows what is best for us and that His plan is good. The freedom in trusting God's plan is also seen in our willingness to let go of the pressure to compare ourselves to others. In today's world, it's easy to look at other people's successes, their progress, or their lives and wonder why ours doesn't seem to match up. We can easily fall into the trap of believing that we should be further along, that we should be achieving more, or that our life should look a certain way. But when we trust in God's plan, we realize that He has a unique path for each of us. We don't need to compare our journey to anyone else's. Our purpose is not defined by external expectations, but by the specific calling God has placed on our lives. When we trust in His plan, we learn to embrace our own journey, knowing that it is exactly what we need in order to grow, mature, and fulfill the purpose He has set before us. At times, trusting in God's plan means stepping into the unknown. It means walking in faith even when we don't know where the path will lead. This can be one of the hardest aspects of trust because we often want to see the entire map before we take the first step. We want to know exactly where we're going and how we're going to get there. But trusting God means we are willing to take that first step, even without the full picture. It's believing that He will guide us as we move forward, even if we can't see the entire journey ahead. This kind of trust takes courage, but it also deepens our relationship with God. It allows us to experience His guidance, provision, and faithfulness in real time in the midst of the unknown. The beauty of trusting God's plan is that it removes the weight of carrying the future on our shoulders. We are no longer burdened by the constant worry and anxiety about what will happen next. Instead, we are free to focus on the present, knowing that God has already gone before us and is making a way for us. We are free to live in the moment, fully trusting that God will lead us step by step, day by day, to exactly where we need to be. Ultimately, trusting in God's plan leads to a deeper understanding of His love and faithfulness. When we look back over our lives, we can see how God has worked in ways we never expected, how He has provided, protected, and guided us in ways that only He could. The more we trust in His plan, the more we realize that He is always at work, even when we don't fully understand what's happening. Trusting God's plan is not a one-time decision. It is a daily choice to let go of our own control and embrace His perfect guidance. The freedom, peace, and joy that come from trusting His plan are worth the surrender, and in doing so, we open ourselves to experiencing life as it was meant to be, fulfilled, guided, and carried by His loving hand. In every season of life, we are faced with choices. Choices about how we will handle the challenges that come our way, how we will respond to the uncertainties, and how we will carry the burdens that sometimes seem too heavy to bear. We can choose to strive, struggle, and control every detail of our lives, or we can choose to let go, trusting that God is bigger than our problems, that His peace will sustain us, and that His plan is perfect. When we surrender control, trust in His power, and allow Him to take over our situations, we discover a peace that surpasses understanding. This peace does not come from our ability to manage every situation, but from knowing that we are not alone. As we trust in God's wisdom, His timing, and His plan for our lives, we experience true freedom. The freedom to rest in His care and to face life's challenges with confidence, knowing that He is always with us. In the moments of waiting, uncertainty, and difficulty, let us remember that our patience and faith are never in vain. God's plan for our lives is far greater than anything we could design on our own, and in His perfect timing, He will bring us to the place where we need to be. Trusting in Him is not just an act of surrender. It is an invitation to experience a life of freedom, peace, and purpose. So, release the weight of control. Trust in His power, rest in His peace, and embrace the journey He has for you. When you let God take over, you will find that you are not only carried through every situation, but transformed by the process. Trust Him and let His plan unfold. God is faithful, and His timing is always perfect. Let go and let God take over your situation.